7 charter buses pulled up to my property at 2 a.m., dumping 300 drunk college kids onto my freshly planted vegetable garden. And the HOA president who orchestrated it was about to learn why you never mess with a retired Marine Corps logistics officer. Picture this. I'm watching from my kitchen window as Vivian Ashworth Klein, this entitled piece of work in her designer robe, directs these kids like she's conducting a symphony of revenge. The sickening crunch of my irrigation pipe snapping, the sweet smell of crushed tomato plants, and this psycho actually pointing at my late wife's memorial roses, telling them to really trash that flower area. My wife's roses. The ones we planted together before my last deployment. That crossed a line you don't come back from. While she thought she was destroying me, I was building the case that would land her in handcuffs on the evening news. Before we dive in, what would you do if buses dumped Partiers on your property? Drop your city. I'm collecting HOA nightmare stories. My name's Marcus Rodriguez, but everyone calls me Tank. Earned that nickname, hauling logistics equipment through 3 Marine deployments. At 52, I figured I'd done my time dealing with hostile territory. Clearly, I hadn't met suburban Texas HOA presidents yet. After my divorce, I needed somewhere to decompress. Found this perfect 2.3-acre corner lot in Pinehurst Valley. Seemed like a quiet community where a guy could grow tomatoes in peace. The realtor mentioned an HOA, but I'd survive Fallujah. How scary could a homeowners association be? Famous last words, right? My therapist kept pushing gardening for PTSD. Gets your hands in soil, connects you to growth, she said. Smart lady. There's something magical about that rich black earth crumbling between your fingers at sunrise. The gentle whisper of irrigation mist catching morning light. The earthy smell of fresh cedar mulch warming in Texas heat. Every morning I'd sit on my back porch with coffee, listening to mockingbirds calling from the oak trees, watching my tomato seedlings reach toward the sun. Sarah and I had always planned a big garden. Cancer stole that dream, but I planted her memorial roses anyway. Those soft pink climbers she'd circled in catalogs during chemo. Right where the morning sun lingers longest, where she would have wanted them. Enter the villain of our story, Vivian Ashworth Klein. Picture the final boss of suburban entitlement. Salon-perfect blonde Bob drives a BMW SUV so white it hurts your eyes. Lives in that massive colonial on Magnolia Drive that screams, I peaked in my sorority. This woman literally measures grass height with a ruler. I've seen her issue violation notices for Christmas lights being warm white instead of cool white. Week 1, I'm installing raised garden beds when her BMW glides up like she's conducting a royal inspection. Out steps Vivian in tennis whites, clipboard clutched like a weapon, expression suggesting she'd stepped in something unpleasant. Excuse me, she announces, no introduction naturally. Are you establishing some sort of agricultural operation here? Agricultural operation. Lady, I'm planting cherry tomatoes, not running a cattle ranch. Just vegetables, ma'am. Doctor recommended therapy. Her perfectly microlated eyebrows practically launched into orbit. Well, you'll require architectural committee approval for permanent structures. We have covenant restrictions about maintaining proper residential aesthetics. Here's my fatal error. I was polite. I'll review the guidelines. Thanks. 3 days later, certified mail. Violation notice, $75 fine for non-decorative plant species. She fined me for tomatoes. Time for reconnaissance. Spent. 2 days at the courthouse pulling records, property, deed, survey, original covenants. Found gold. My lot predated their 2019 amendments. I was grandfathered from most restrictions, including their decorative plants-only nonsense. Responded professionally with documentation, respectful tone, attached legal proof. Case closed. Vivian doubled down immediately. More certified letters, board meeting ambushes, anonymous city complaints about water waste and pest concerns. Her BMW started cruising past twice daily, slowing near my driveway like she was gathering intelligence. The truth emerged during a fence line chat with Mrs. Patterson, my sweet elderly neighbor who shares tomatoes from her own secret garden. Vivian claims your property hurts her home value, Mrs. Patterson whispered, glancing around nervously. She's been trying to sell for months. Buyers keep asking about the farm situation. The farm situation. My therapy garden was apparently agricultural terrorism. Suddenly, everything clicked. This wasn't about community standards or covenant compliance. This was pure economics, one entitled woman watching her investment threatened by a veteran growing his own food. The gritty smell of her desperation was almost as strong as my morning coffee. She wanted war with someone who'd survived 3 combat tours. Bring it on, princess. 2 weeks later, Vivian dropped the nuclear option. I'm watering my tomatoes Tuesday morning when my phone buzzes. Certified mail notification already. I just buried her first violation with bulletproof legal documentation. Either this woman couldn't read or she was doubling down on stupid. Turns out she was doubling down on stupid. The envelope contained 14 separate violation notices. 14. This psycho had apparently spent her weekend prowling my property with a measuring tape and a personal vendetta. Unapproved fence height. My chain link met county standards. Commercial scale gardening operation. I had 6 raised beds, not 6 acres. Water usage exceeding residential norms based on what? Her psychic powers, pest attraction potential, code for I hate vegetables and the veteran who grows them. Total damage, $1,100 in fines. 30 days to pay or face lien proceedings. She was threatening to steal my house over tomatoes. Game on, princess. Time to show this suburban dictator what 20 years of Marine Corps logistics training looks like. The first rule of warfare, know your enemy's weaknesses better than they know their strengths. I spent that afternoon conducting deep reconnaissance on Vivian Ashworth Klein. Amazing what public records reveal when you actually know how to research. Property permits, zoning applications, HOA filings. It's all there if you dig deep enough. Here's a knowledge nugget most people don't realize. Every home improvement requiring permits gets filed with the county, and those records are public. You can expose HOA board hypocrisy by checking if they follow the same rules they enforce. Jackpot number 1. Princess Vivian built her precious deck in 2020 without architectural committee approval, the same approval she was demanding for my vegetable beds. Jackpot number 2. Her orthodontist husband runs business consultations from their home office, direct violation of residential zoning restrictions. But the crown jewel was her property survey. That fancy decorative pond she Instagram posts constantly extends 3 feet onto HOA common property. Unauthorized encroachment on community assets. The irony tasted sweeter than my homegrown strawberries. I filed formal complaints against Vivian using her exact pompous language. Every technical violation, every bureaucratic phrase thrown back at her with military precision. Unauthorized permanent structure exceeding approved specifications. The deck, commercial enterprise. C conducted in residential zone. Hubby side hustle. Unpermitted encroachment on designated community property. The beloved pond. Then I requested an emergency board meeting to address the president's documented pattern of covenant violations and selective enforcement. The mini twist. She had to preside over her own disciplinary hearing. 3 days later, community center conference room. Fluorescent lights humming like angry wasps. The acid smell of burnt coffee mixing with Vivian's overpowering perfume. 5 board members fidgeting like kids called to the principal's office. I arrived with my evidence folder. Vivian clutched her designer purse like body armor. This is clearly retaliatory harassment, she announced before anyone else spoke. I smiled calmly. Ma'am, I'm using your exact citation language from my violations. If documenting rule violations constitutes harassment, what would you call your 14 notices? Board member Janet Morgan shifted uncomfortably. Vivian, did you actually measure his fence before citing it? Of course, I measured it. It's obviously over-regulation height. I slid my contractor's survey across the table. 6, 2 in. County standard for residential properties. Here's the original permit and inspection certificate. The room went silent except for that angry wasp fluorescent light. What about his commercial farming operation? Vivian pressed, desperation creeping into her voice like water through a cracked foundation. 6 raised beds, total footprint, 240 feet. OA covenants permit up to 500 square feet of landscaping modifications without committee approval. I opened the covenant book to the exact page, section 4.7, subsection C. Would you like me to read it aloud? Board member Bob Santos cleared his throat awkwardly. Vivian, have you reviewed the actual covenant language you've been citing? The silence stretched like piano wire. I could practically smell. Vivian's panic sweat competing with her expensive perfume as she realized she'd walked into a perfectly laid trap. "This is ridiculous," she finally exploded. "I'm protecting property values while he transforms our community into some agricultural wasteland." "Ma'am," I said, voice steady as a sniper's breath, "I'm growing tomatoes for personal consumption. You build unpermitted structures and operate an unlicensed business from your residence." That's when Janet Morgan pulled out her own folder. Apparently, other board members had been doing homework. "Vivian, we received your husband's retroactive business permit application yesterday, backdated to 2019. Why are we seeing this now?" Vivian's face went whiter than her BMW. "I move to suspend all violation proceedings against Mr. Rodriguez pending comprehensive compliance review," Bob announced. "Seconded," Janet said quickly. Vivian shot up so fast her chair shrieked against linoleum. "This is mutiny." I packed my evidence calmly. "Ma'am, this is accountability." She fled like her heels were on fire. Vivian's next move came disguised as concerned citizenship because nothing says good neighbor like weaponizing city bureaucracy. I'm deadheading my late wife's roses Thursday morning when the doorbell rings. City code enforcement officer stands there looking like he'd rather be getting a root canal. Behind him, Vivian's white BMW lurks at the curb like a shark circling wounded prey. "Mr. Rodriguez." "Officer Jenkins. Code enforcement got some complaints about zoning violations. Mind if I look around?" Of course she did. Princess Vivian had escalated from HOA harassment to full government deployment. "What kind of violations?" I asked, though I already knew this would be peak suburban insanity. He consulted his clipboard with the enthusiasm of a man reading his own death sentence. "Agricultural business operations in residential zone, excessive calm, resile traffic, health code violations related to food production and sales." I actually laughed. This woman thought my 6 tomato plants constituted agribusiness. Next, she'd probably report me to the FDA for unlicensed salsa production. "Officer, I'm happy to show you around, but who filed these complaints?" Anonymous tip to our hotline behind him. Mrs. Patterson's curtain twitched. The whole neighborhood was getting free entertainment courtesy of Vivian's mental breakdown. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random harassment. Vivian was building an official paper trail documenting every escalation, creating a bureaucratic record of my supposed violations. Diabolical in a suburban housewife kind of way. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She didn't know that my Marine buddy Jake had taught me about public records during our poker nights. Turns out you can request copies of all complaints filed against your property, including contact information, unless they filed anonymously. Government transparency works both ways. "Officer Jenkins," I said as we walked toward my allegedly illegal agricultural empire, "I'd like to file a public records request for all complaints against this address in the past year. Also need complaint history for 425 Magnolia Drive." His face went pale. That's not typical. Neither are anonymous tips about imaginary farming operations, but here we are. While Jenkins inspected my tomatoes like they might launch an insurrection, I was calculating angles. Vivian's complaint pattern would expose her harassment campaign. Better yet, I could investigate whatever skeletons she'd been hiding in her own perfectly manicured closet. 20 minutes later, Jenkins finished his investigation. My irrigation-compliant, garden-scale residential, pest management, professional grade, commercial traffic non-existent, unless you counted the UPS guy. "Sir, I don't see violatio." "NS here," he admitted, sounding relieved. "Your setup's cleaner than most restaurants." "Excellent. When's that written report coming?" The panic flash across his face was priceless. Vivian had probably sold this as routine harassment, not legitimate inspection requiring actual documentation. "I'll file that this week." "Perfect. I'll collect copies Friday along with those public records." His truck barely cleared my driveway before Vivian's BMW vanished. Smart hovering during your revenge plot is amateur hour, but defense was boring. Time for offense. That afternoon, City Hall became my intelligence headquarters. The records clerk, Rose, a sweet lady who'd started recognizing my weekly visits, pulled up the complaint database with growing fascination. "Mr. Rodriguez, you've got 6 complaints in 2 months. Same phone number every time." She squinted at her screen. "Honey, that's obsessive. What other addresses has that number targeted?" Rose's expression shifted from helpful clerk to fellow conspiracy theorist. This number filed 47 complaints in 6 months. Same properties repeatedly. Someone's turned harassment into a hobby. 47 complaints. Vivian wasn't just targeting me. She was conducting psychological warfare against the entire neighborhood through bureaucratic terrorism. The real gold mine was pulling up 425 Magnolia Drive. "Well, isn't this interesting?" Rosa murmured. "No permits for that deck addition. Pool permit expired 2020, but shows active use. Business license filed yesterday, backdated to 2019. She grinned conspiritually. Somebody's been scrambling. The smell of Vivian's desperation practically wafted off those hastily submitted papers like cheap perfume mixed with flop sweat. "Rosa, what happens when someone abuses the complaint system?" "Harassment by process misdemeanor charge, possible fines." She leaned closer between us. "Inspector Jenkins told his supervisor about this case. They don't appreciate being used as weapons in neighbor wars." Music to my ears. I remembered reading about this in one of those legal blogs I'd been devouring since this nightmare started. When someone repeatedly files false or frivolous complaints to harass another person, it becomes criminal behavior regardless of their intentions. I left City Hall with ammunition. Every complaint Vivian filed, documentation of her violations, and the phone number linking all her anonymous tips, the satisfying crunch of gravel under my boots, sounded like victory marching across that parking lot. That evening, I drafted a formal harassment complaint to the city manager, attached evidence of Vivian's systematic abuse of city resources, and requested investigation into malicious use of government services. The predator was about to discover she'd been hunting a bigger predator, and Princess Vivian had no clue what was stalking her. 1 week later, Vivian played her nuclear card. An emergency HOA board meeting with my property as ground zero. The certified notice arrived on a Monday, scheduling the meeting for Thursday evening. Emergency resolution regarding immediate health and safety violations at 247 Oakage Drive. My address. The woman had officially declared war on my tomatoes. I could smell her desperation from 3 blocks away, like burnt coffee mixed with expensive perfume and pure panic. My public records requests had clearly rattled her cage and cornered animals do stupid things. Thursday night, community center conference room. Same buzzing fluorescent lights, same burnt coffee stench, but this time, the energy felt different. Vivian sat at the head table like she was presiding over my execution, wearing her power suit and that smug expression that screamed, "Checkmate." "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're here to address an escalating situation that threatens our entire community's health and safety." I settled into my folding chair with my evidence folder, watching her performance with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this movie before. "Mr. Rodriguez's unauthorized agricultural operation has created standing water hazards, attracted rodents and insects, and decreased property values throughout our neighborhood. The board has no choice but to impose an immediate lien of $3,500 plus attorney fees." There it was, the mini twist I'd been expecting. She wasn't just escalating complaints anymore. She was trying to financially destroy me through emergency powers she probably didn't even possess. But here's where all those late-night research sessions paid off. I'd spent the weekend reading every HOA law blog I could find and learned something crucial. Emergency powers require actual emergencies, not manufactured ones. Board members also have fiduciary duties to all homeowners, meaning they can't just steamroll residents without due process. "Ma'am," I said, standing slowly, "before this board votes on anything, I'd like to present some evidence." Her perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up. "This isn't a trial, Mr. Rodriguez. The board has already reviewed the situation. Have they reviewed this?" I pulled out my first bombshell, the city inspector's written report, clearing my property of all violations. Official findings from code enforcement. No health hazards, no zoning violations, no safety concerns. Board member Janet Morgan reached for the document. "Vivian, did you see this report before calling tonight's meeting?" The silence stretched like piano wire. Vivian's face was turning an interesting shade of pink that clashed with her blonde highlights. "I have additional evidence," I continued, pulling out my second bombshell. Documentation showing Mrs. Ashworth Klein owes $47,000 in unpaid HOA dues through her husband's business operations. The room went dead silent. except for that angry wasp fluorescent light. Bob Santos leaned forward. "Vivian, is this accurate?" That's irrelevant," she sputtered. "We're here about his violations." "Actually," I said, consulting my notes like I was reading a grocery list, "Texas property code requires board members to be current on all assessments before voting on liens against other homeowners. Voting while owing money constitutes breach of fiduciary duty." I'd memorized that statute after finding it buried in one of Jake's legal databases. Amazing how many HOA board members don't know their own legal obligations. The other board members were exchanging those looks you see in disaster movies right before someone suggests evacuating. "Furthermore," I continued, "I have documentation of Mrs. Ashworth Klein's pattern of harassment through false city complaints, unauthorized surveillance of my property, and selective enforcement of HOA covenants." Janet Morgan was reading the city inspector's report with growing amazement. "Vivian, according to this, his property is actually above residential standards. Why are we discussing emergency action?" That's when Vivian completely lost it. "Because he doesn't belong here," she screamed, her carefully constructed facade cracking like cheap paint. "This is a respectable neighborhood, not some military housing project. His kind brings down property values with their government mentality and agricultural nonsense." His kind government mentality. The mask had finally slipped, and everybody in that room heard her true feelings about veterans. The silence that followed was deafening. You could practically hear her social standing crumbling like stale crackers. Board member Dennis Walsh, retired cop I'd barely spoken to, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ashworth Klein, did you just make discriminatory statements about military service members?" Bob Santos was already reaching for his phone. "I'm recording this meeting for HOA records." Those comments are now part of official minutes. Vivian's husband, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, stood up with the expression of a man watching his wife commit social suicide in real time. "Vivian, we need to go now." "I'm not finished," she shrieked, but her orthodontist husband was already dragging her toward the exit. "Mrs. Ashworth Klein," Janet Morgan called after her, "the board will be discussing your resignation at our next meeting." The door slammed behind them, with the finality of a coffin lid closing. I packed my evidence folder as the remaining board members huddled in emergency session. Through the window, I watched Vivian's BMW peel out of the parking lot like she was fleeing a crime scene, which in many ways she was. Friday morning brought the call that changed everything. Jake Morrison, my Marine buddy, turned attorney, phoned while I was enjoying coffee and the sweet sound of Vivian's social media silence. She'd gone dark after Thursday's meltdown, probably on damage control with a crisis management consultant. "Tank, you need to hear this," Jake said without preamble. "I've been digging through your HOA documents, and I found something beautiful. Remember that utility easement behind your property?" Of course I remembered. 20-foot strip running along my back fence line. Part of the original subdivision plat standard utility access, never been used for anything except the occasional repair truck. What about it? Check out Amendment 47B from the 2019 Covenant revisions. HOA claims right to temporarily utilize any common areas or designated easements for community events and gatherings. The pieces click together like a rifle bolt sliding into battery. She's planning something for that easement. Gets better. I cross-referenced with county records. Your property is accessible through that easement without touching private driveways. Technically legal access for community events. My blood chilled as the full scope of Vivian's plan crystallized. She couldn't attack me through normal channels anymore. City complaints failed. Board meeting backfired. Harassment documented. But she'd found a loophole buried in HOA fine print. "Jake, what constitutes a community event under that clause?" That's the beautiful part. It's deliberately vague. Could be anything from a block party to, he paused meaningfully, a community appreciation gathering with invited guests. Invited guests. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth as I processed the implications. "There's more, Tank." Mrs. Patterson called my office this morning. She overheard Vivian on her back patio yesterday talking to someone about weekend plans and teaching that military a lesson he'll never forget. Mentioned something about friends in the event planning business. And 7 buses should be enough. 7 buses. My coffee cup hit the kitchen counter with a ceramic clink that sounded like artillery in the sudden silence. She's going to flood my property with people. That's my read. But here's the catch. Even with easement access, she still needs 30-day written notice for any community event, plus specific details about nature, duration, and expected attendance. I've checked your mail and HOA records. No notice filed. I was already moving toward my security camera system, mind racing through defensive preparations. What's the legal exposure if she does this without proper notice? Criminal trespass if she exceeds easement boundaries. Property damage liability. If you can prove malicious intent, harassment charges stick. But Tank Jake's voice grew serious. You need to let it happen. Come again? If you stop her beforehand, it's just another HOA dispute. If you let her commit to this plan and document everything, it becomes criminal behavior with witnesses. She's about to hand you a nuclear weapon wrapped in a bow. The genius of it hit me like lightning. Vivian thought she'd found the perfect revenge using HOA authority to authorize a party that would destroy my property and sanity. But she'd gotten so focused on the attack, she'd forgotten about legal requirements and documentation. I thought about Sarah's rose garden directly in the path of any easement access, the memorial bench where I sat every morning with coffee, remembering better times. If Vivian wanted to violate that sacred space, she'd do it over my dead body. But Jake was right. Better to let her dig her own grave. What do I need to document this properly? Everything. Audio, video, witness statements, property damage assessment. I'm drafting emergency restraining order paperwork now, plus criminal complaints for harassment and property destruction. When she pulls this stunt, we'll have her dead to rights. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the easement through my window. Vivian had found what she thought was checkmate legal access to destroy my peace without technically trespassing. She had no idea she was walking into the trap of her lifetime. Time to prepare for war. Saturday morning. War Council convened in my kitchen. Jake Morrison arrived first, carrying a briefcase full of legal ammunition and the grim expression of someone who'd seen too many good people steamrolled by petty tyrants. Maria Santos, my neighbor and civil engineer, came bearing property surveys and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Mrs. Patterson shuffled over with homemade cookies in the kind of righteous anger that only sweet old ladies can properly weaponize. All right, team, I said, spreading Jake's legal documents across my kitchen table. Princess Vivian thinks she's found checkmate. Let's show her W. Hat real strategy looks like. Jake opened his briefcase with the precision of a surgeon. First things first, criminal law trumps HOA authority every single time. She can claim easement rights all she wants, but property damage, harassment, and unlawful assembly are still crimes. Maria unrolled her detailed property survey, pointing to the easement boundaries with her engineer's precision. Tank, this 20-foot strip is all she can legally access. Anything beyond these markers becomes criminal trespass, regardless of what her HOA documents claim. I'd learned this principle during my intelligence training. When the enemy thinks they have perfect cover, that's when they make their biggest mistakes. Vivian's confidence in her legal loophole would make her careless about actual boundaries. What's our documentation strategy? I asked, already knowing we needed overwhelming evidence. Jake pulled out a checklist that would make a marine logistics officer weep with joy. Multiple camera angles covering all potential party areas. Audio recording devices in weatherproof housings. Time-stamped photographs of property condition before, during, and after. Witness statements from neighbors. Official complaints filed with county sheriff before the event happens. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward conspiratorially. I've been talking to the other ladies. Betty Morgan, Dorothy Walsh, even that new couple on Elm Street. Nobody likes what Vivian's been doing to you, honey. We're all willing to testify. This was gold. Community support would destroy any narrative about me being the problem neighbor. Maria spread out her engineering drawings like battle plans. I've documented every sprinkler head, every plant, every structure that could be damaged. We'll have before and after proof of any destruction down to the square inch. Jake nodded approvingly. Insurance won't cover criminal acts by HOA board members. Any damage comes out of Vivian's personal assets, not community funds. Hit someone in the wallet hard enough, and they remember the lesson forever. I remembered reading about this during my late-night legal research binges. When HOA board members exceed their authority for personal vendettas, they lose the protection of community insurance. Vivian was about to discover that revenge has a price tag. What about the party logistics? I asked. How's she planning to get people here? Mrs. Patterson's eyes lit up. Oh, I know about that. My cleaning lady works for 3 families in this neighborhood, including the Ashworth Klein. Vivian hired some college party planning service, the kind that specializes in problem locations where normal venues won't work. Problem locations? Maria repeated with disgust. She literally hired professionals to trash your property. Jake was taking notes furiously. That establishes premeditation and malicious intent. Criminal charges stick when you can prove someone planned to cause damage. The pieces were falling into place like a perfectly executed military operation. Vivian thought she was hiring party planners. Actually, she was hiring witnesses to her own criminal conspiracy. I've got contacts in the sheriff's department, Jake continued. They're not fond of being used as cleanup crews for HOA disputes, but they take property crimes seriously. When this goes down, response time will be fast. I felt that familiar pre-mission calm settling over me. The mental state where chaos becomes manageable and victory becomes inevitable. Equipment check. Maria cameras. 6 units with night vision audio recording and battery backup systems. All weatherproof, all positioned to cover easement boundaries and your memorial garden. Mrs. Patterson, neighborhood intelligence. Phone tree established. Everyone's got your number and 911 on speed dial. Betty's grandson is Ho. Me from college this weekend. He's good with that social media stuff if we need video posted immediately. Jake, legal preparation. Emergency restraining order paperwork ready for filing. Criminal complaints drafted for harassment, property damage, and unlawful assembly. Civil lawsuit prepared for personal damages. I'll be on standby all weekend. The smell of Mrs. Patterson's chocolate chip cookies mixed with the aroma of Maria's industrial-strength coffee, creating an oddly comforting backdrop to our war planning. These people barely knew me 6 months ago. Now they were willing to spend their weekend helping me fight a psychotic HOA president. One more thing, Jake said quietly. Tank, you need to stay calm when this happens. Document everything, but don't engage. Let her commit to the plan completely before authorities arrive. I nodded, thinking about Sarah's roses and the memorial bench she'd never see completed. Vivian wanted to play war games with a Marine Corps veteran. Game on, princess. Let's see what you're really made of. Monday morning brought Vivian's official declaration of war disguised as community spirit. The HOA notice appeared in every mailbox like a virus spreading through the subdivision. Community appreciation gathering. Saturday evening, 8 p.m. until late. Join us in celebrating neighborhood unity. Location, Oakage Commons area. Mr. Rodriguez has graciously agreed to host this special community event showcasing our shared outdoor spaces. I stared at that notice over my morning coffee, admiring the psychological warfare. She twisted my upcoming humiliation into my apparent cooperation, making it impossible for me to object without looking like I was backing out of my own party. Diabolical. I had to respect the strategy even as I planned to destroy it. Jake called within the hour, saw the notice. She's good positioning this as your event means NEC. Complaints make you look unstable, but she's also committed in writing to a specific date and claim of authorization. I pointed out no takebacks now. The mini twist hit me Tuesday when Maria Santos knocked on my door with intelligence that changed everything. Her cleaning lady source had struck gold during Monday's shift at the Ashworth Klein mansion. Tank, you need to hear this, Maria whispered, glancing around like we were planning a coup. Vivian didn't hire party planners. She hired party promoters, the kind that specialize in college rares at problem properties. They get paid per busload of kids they deliver. My blood chilled. How many buses? 7 confirmed. Maybe more if the first batch performs well. She's paying $2,000 base plus $100 per bus over 5. The promoter told his crew this was revenge entertainment, maximum impact on the property owner. Revenge entertainment. This woman had weaponized party promotion against a veteran's memorial garden. The intelligence kept flowing. Wednesday, Mrs. Patterson reported overhearing Vivian coaching her orthodontist husband on their story. Property damage would be unforeseeable vandalism by outside parties. The HOA had proper authorization, and Tank was clearly mentally unstable if he complained about his own community event. They were building a narrative to gaslight me even as they destroyed my property. Thursday brought the sabotage attempts. First, a mysterious complaint to the power company about unsafe electrical usage at my address, clearly trying to get my electricity shut off before the party. I'd learned from my military days to always have backup power, so my generator was fueled and ready. Next came an anonymous report to the water department about potential irrigation system hazards. The inspector arrived Friday afternoon, looked at my perfectly maintained sprinkler setup, and shook his head in disgust. "Sir, someone's been filing a lot of complaints about your property," he said, handing me his inspection report. "All cleared, all legitimate maintenance. Seems like harassment to me. Would you be willing to put that opinion in writing?" I asked. His grin told me everything. "Already did. Good luck with whatever's going on here." Friday evening, the diesel smell hit my neighborhood like an invading army. Charter buses were doing reconnaissance runs, drivers familiarizing themselves with routes to my back fence line, the rumble of their engines mixed with the scent of exhaust and impending chaos. I activated my security system, checked camera angles, and called Jake for final legal confirmation. "Everything's in place," he assured me. "County Sheriff's Office is aware of potential large disturbance at your address tomorrow night. Code enforcement is on standby for unpermitted event violations. Property damage assessor is scheduled for Sunday morning." But the real intelligence coup came from Mrs. Patterson's grandson, that college kid who'd been monitoring social media. He knocked on my door Friday night with printouts that made my jaw drop. "Mr. Rodriguez, check this out. The party promoter's been advertising your address on college apps. Epic outdoor rager. Bring your crew, free buses, party till dawn." It's gone viral on campus. 300 confirmed attendees, maybe more. Vivian hadn't just planned to embarrass me with a neighborhood gathering. She'd orchestrated a full-scale invasion designed to destroy my property and drive me from the community. I sat in my kitchen that Friday night, looking through my window at Sarah's memorial roses swaying gently in the evening breeze. Tomorrow night, drunk college kids would trample the garden we'd planned together, destroy the bench I'd built in her memory, desecrate the only physical reminder of our shared dreams. The rage burned cold and clean in my chest. Not the hot fury that makes men stupid, but the calculated anger that makes Marines lethal. Vivian thought she was orchestrating my destruction. She had no idea she was about to commit career suicide in front of hundreds of witnesses, with every moment documented for criminal prosecution. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Let's see how community appreciation looks when it involves criminal charges and personal bankruptcy. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and this time there'd be no escape. Saturday evening arrived like Judgment Day, wrapped in diesel exhaust and bass-heavy music. The first charter bus rumbled down Oak Ridge Drive at 7:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the official start time. I watched from my kitchen window as confused college kids stumbled off, clutching red Solo cups and looking around like they'd been dropped on an alien planet. "Where's the party?" I heard one kid ask his buddy as they wandered toward my fence line. That's when Vivian made her grand entrance. Her white BMW pulled up like she was arriving at a movie premiere. Windows down, designer sunglasses despite the evening hour. She stepped out wearing what I can only describe as suburban mom tries to be cool skinny jeans, bedazzled tank top, and enough jewelry to stalk a small boutique. The mini twist unfolded in real time as I watched through my security cameras. Vivian wasn't just observing her revenge plot, she was directing it like some demented symphony conductor. "Welcome to our community appreciation event," she announced to the growing crowd of college kids. "Feel free to enjoy all the outdoor space, especially that lovely garden area behind the fence, my memorial garden." She was literally pointing drunk strangers toward Sarah's roses. Bus number 2 arrived as I activated my recording system. The smell of spilled beer mixed with my fertilizer created an aroma that would haunt my nightmares. Young voices echoed across what used to be my peaceful neighborhood, turning my therapeutic sanctuary into a carnival from hell. Mrs. Patterson's curtains twitched as she began her documentation duties. Bob Santos emerged from his house with a camera. Maria Santos positioned herself on her back deck with a clear view of property boundaries. My allies were in position. Bus number 3 brought the music equipment portable speakers that immediately began blasting bass so loud my windows vibrated. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth as I realized Vivian wasn't planning a party. She was orchestrating psychological warfare designed to drive me to a breakdown. By 8:15 p.m., all 7 buses had arrived. Nearly 300 college kids swarmed my neighborhood like locusts, following Vivian's directions toward the community garden space, and that nice outdoor area behind the property line. I stayed hidden, documenting everything while my heart broke watching strangers trample through Sarah's memorial space. Beer cans crushed my newly planted marolds. Someone set up beer pong on the memorial bench I'd built with my own hands. A group of kids started pulling irrigation pipes from the ground like they were harvesting some kind of crop. The property destruction was systematic and devastating, but I forced myself to remain calm. Every moment was being recorded. Every act of vandalism was building my criminal case. 9:45 p.m. brought the cavalry, 2 county sheriff deputies responding to noise complaints from half the neighborhood. I watched through my window as they approached Vivian, who immediately launched into her prepared performance. "Officers, this is just a community event authorized by our homeowners association," she said, gesturing toward the chaos behind my fence like it was a church picnic. "We're using the designated easement area for neighborhood unity activities." Deputy Martinez had recognized him from community events, looked skeptical as he surveyed the destruction. "Ma'am, do you have permits for an event this size?" That's when Vivian's mask slipped just enough to reveal the panic underneath. "It's a private HOA gathering. We don't need permits for community activities." Wrong answer. I'd researched this extensively. Any gathering over 50 people on residential property requires county permits regardless of who's hosting. I stepped onto my front porch with my evidence folder, approaching the deputies with military bearing and civilian politeness. "Officers, I'm Marcus Rodriguez. This is my property and I need to report criminal trespass and property damage." Vivian's face went white as I handed Deputy Martinez my documentation packet, property surveys showing easement boundaries, security footage of kids destroying my garden outside those boundaries, audio recordings of Vivian directing them to my memorial space. "Ma'am," Deputy Martinez said after reviewing my evidence, "these partygoers are clearly exceeding easement access. That constitutes trespass on private property." "But the HOA authorized," Vivian started. "The HOA doesn't override criminal law," Deputy Martinez interrupted. "And according to these recordings, you directed people to damage his memorial garden specifically." That's when her orthodontist husband emerged from the crowd, looking like a man who just realized his wife had committed social suicide in front of 300 witnesses. "Officers, my wife may have gotten carried away," he said, shooting Vivian a look that could freeze lava. "We're happy to shut this down immediately." Too late. I documented everything needed for criminal prosecution. As the buses loaded confused and angry college kids, Deputy Martinez handed Vivian a citation for hosting an unpermitted event and informed her that criminal charges were penned. In review by the district attorney's office, the revolution had begun, and Princess Vivian had just fired the shot that would destroy her own empire. Sunday morning brought the aftermath that would define Vivian's downfall. The county damage assessor arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, clipboard in hand, ready to document what looked like a natural disaster had swept through my backyard. Sarah's memorial rose garden trampled into muddy destruction. My irrigation system ripped apart like confetti. The memorial bench I'd built with my own hands, carved with obscenities and stained with beer. Total damage, $8,400. But the emotional devastation, priceless evidence for criminal court. By Sunday afternoon, the story had exploded across local media. Channel 7 News arrived first, followed by 2 newspapers and a blogger who specialized in HOA horror stories. Vivian barricaded herself inside her mansion like a fugitive, but I welcomed every interview request with military precision. "This wasn't a party," I told the cameras, standing beside my destroyed memorial garden. "This was revenge disguised as community spirit, executed by someone who couldn't stand that a veteran was living peacefully next door." The real fireworks came Sunday evening at the emergency HOA board meeting. Community center packed beyond capacity, standing room only with overflow crowds spilling into the parking lot. Local news cameras rolling. Vivian arrived with a new attorney, her husband's colleague looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Board President Janet Morgan, who'd replaced Vivian after Thursday's racist meltdown, called for order as residents filed in, carrying signs "Support Tank," "Veterans Deserve Better," and my personal favorite, "Vivian's Got to Go." I entered with Jake, Maria, Mrs. Patterson, and a folder of evidence thick enough to stop bullets. The crowd erupted in applause. My neighbors standing, and clapping like I just won the Medal of Honor. Vivian sat in the front row with her husband, looking like she was attending her own funeral. Before we begin, Janet Morgan announced, "I want everyone to know this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on our community website." Smart move. Complete transparency meant no backroom deals or cover-ups. Jake presented our evidence methodically. Audio recordings of Vivian directing partygoers to my memorial garden, video footage of systematic property destruction, documentation of her pattern of harassment spanning months. The room grew quieter with each revelation until you could hear people breathing. Then came the community witness testimony. Mrs. Patterson stood first, her sweet grandmother voice carrying moral authority that silenced the room. "I've lived in this neighborhood 40 years. Never seen anyone treated with such cruelty as Vivian showed this veteran. She tried to destroy his therapy garden, the one he planted for his late wife." Bob Santos followed. Then Maria, then elderly Mrs. Morgan with her walker and her grandson translating. One by one, neighbors testified about Vivian's threats, her surveillance, her promises to make Tank's life hell until he moves away. The pattern emerged like a masterpiece of malice. Systematic harassment, discriminatory language about veterans, abuse of HOA authority for personal vendettas. That's when Vivian's attorney tried damage control. My client made some regrettable decisions, but this was clearly a community event that got out of hand. No malicious intent can be proven. Wrong courtroom, wrong audience, wrong evidence. I stood slowly, feeling 300 pairs of eyes on me, and delivered the mic drop moment that would end Vivian Ashworth Klein's reign of suburban terror forever. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying the command presence of 20 years in the Marines, I want everyone to hear exactly what Mrs. Ashworth Klein said when she directed those college kids to my property. I pressed play on my audio recorder, and Vivian's voice filled the community center with crystal clarity. "Use that pretty garden area too. Really trash it good. That military needs to learn his place in this neighborhood." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in the parking lot. Vivian's face had gone from pale to green. Her husband buried his head in his hands. Her attorney looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Ma'am," I continued, my voice steady as granite, "you paid someone to destroy my late wife's memorial garden because you couldn't stand having a veteran in your neighborhood. That recording is now evidence in your criminal trial." The crowd erupted, not applause, raw fury. 300 neighbors who'd finally heard the truth about their HOA president's character. Janet Morgan called for order, but the damage was complete and irreversible. "The board votes unanimously to remove Vivian Ashworth Klein from all HOA positions effective immediately," she announced over the crowd noise. "We also vote to refer this matter to our insurance company and recommend criminal prosecution." Vivian tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to maintain some shred of dignity as her world collapsed in real time, but her microphone had been turned off, her authority stripped away, her reputation destroyed by her own recorded words. She fled the meeting like her designer heels were on fire, her husband trailing behind with the defeated posture of a man whose wife had just committed social murder-suicide on live television. Through the community center windows, I watched her white BMW screech out of the parking lot for the last time. The Queen was dead. Long live the community. Monday morning brought the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. Sill. Ents from 425 Magnolia Drive. Vivian's white BMW was gone. Moving trucks arrived Tuesday. By Wednesday, the for sale sign went up with motivated seller plastered across it like a surrender flag. Princess Vivian had abdicated her throne and fled the kingdom she'd tried so hard to rule. The criminal charges came through Thursday: harassment, criminal mischief, and fraudulent use of authority. Vivian's mugshot made the evening news, completing her transformation from HOA dictator to convicted felon. The judge sentenced her to probation, community service, full restitution, and a restraining order keeping her 500 yards from my property. But the real justice came from watching my community heal. Janet Morgan proved to be everything Vivian wasn't: transparent, fair, and actually interested in serving homeowners instead of terrorizing them. The new board adopted what residents started calling Tank's rules: mandatory public hearings before any fines, written documentation for all violations, and an appeals process that didn't require hiring lawyers. My memorial garden rose from the ashes more beautiful than ever. Neighbors volunteered their weekends to help replant, donate materials, and rebuild what Vivian's revenge had destroyed. Mrs. Patterson brought heirloom rose cuttings from her grandmother's garden. Maria Santos designed a new irrigation system that was twice as efficient as the old one. Bob Santos and his teenage son rebuilt the memorial bench with cedar that would last decades, but the community did something that brought tears to my eyes. They insisted on adding a plaque dedicating the garden to all military spouses who support their veterans' healing journey. Sarah would have loved that. The financial reckoning was swift and brutal. Vivian's homeowner's insurance denied all claims because her actions constituted criminal behavior. The $8,400 in damages came straight from their personal assets along with my legal fees and emotional distress compensation. Their house sold at a $75,000 loss. Apparently, living next to a revenge party crime scene hurts property values. The legal precedent made waves across Texas. Jake started getting calls from other HOA abuse victims, and he launched a specialty practice helping homeowners fight corrupt board members. My case became required reading in several law schools as an example of how documentation and patience can defeat even the most determined suburban tyrants. 6 months later, I established the Sarah Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship for military families pursuing degrees in horticulture or agriculture therapy. The seed money came from my settlement with Vivian, and the annual fundraiser happens right here in the Memorial Garden every spring. This year's first recipient was Maria Santos's niece, a young woman studying therapeutic gardening for PTSD treatment. Sarah would have been proud to help launch that career. The national impact surprised me. Military publications featured my story as an example of standing up to discrimination. I testified before the Texas legislature about HOA accountability, helping pass stronger protections for military families. The Homeowner Bill of Rights law now requires HOA boards to undergo bias training and follow due process before imposing fines. But the most satisfying change was personal. My garden became the neighborhood gathering place, kids picking cherry tomatoes with permission, elderly neighbors stopping for morning coffee on the memorial bench, new military families getting advice about dealing with difficult neighbors. I even got a call from another veteran in Florida facing similar HOA harassment involving his service dog. Guess I'm expanding my consulting services to help military families fight suburban dictators nationwide. 3 months ago, I received an unexpected visitor, Vivian's orthodontist husband. He looked tired, older, carrying the weight of being married to someone whose hatred had destroyed their life. I wanted to apologize, he said quietly, and to tell you something. Vivian's getting therapy now, court-ordered, but she's finally dealing with whatever made her like that. I appreciated the gesture, but some bridges burned too completely to rebuild. He moved to Colorado after their divorce finalized. Vivian disappeared entirely, probably started over somewhere that doesn't Google criminal records. Their old house bought by a young military couple with 2 kids and dreams of a big garden. Perfect karma. As I finish this story, I'm sitting on Sarah's memorial bench, watching sunrise paint my tomatoes gold, listening to mockingbirds call from the oak trees, breathing the sweet scent of roses she never got to see bloom. If you've got an HA nightmare story, drop it in the comments below. I'm collecting them for future episodes, and maybe we can help you find justice too. And hey, if this story fired you up, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're building a community of people who refuse to be bullied by petty tyrants. That's all for today's HOA madness. If watching justice serve itself made your day, smash that like button, share your thoughts down below, and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.